Hello, Al. Hello, Johnny.
Enjoying your stay, I'm sure?
Yes, very much.
Excellent. Is it too hot or not?
Very hot. Okay. So we're talking about a story where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was going to just taste something, and Rabbi Gamliel, they were just going to send him up some fruit. Nevertheless, they both said, bring them up to the sukkah, we'll eat them in the sukkah. When they would give Rab Tzadok food less than kibetza, he did not do netilas yadayim, not lubamap, he just would hold it in a handkerchief. V'achlo chutz l'sukkah. He would eat it outside of the sukkah. He did not consider it an achila. V'lo berech achrav, and didn't bench because it was not considered kedei svia, implying hakabetza boy sukkah. That seems to imply all of these was only because it was less than a kabetza. If it was a kabetza, it would require a sukkah. But this goes against what Rav Yosef and Abaya said, which a sudas kva was like 2 or 3 beitzos, right? Lemetev tuv to Rav Yosef and Abaya. So maybe Dilma Pachos mikabetza and Netilu bracha loboy. That's only less than a kabetza. He's talking about Netilu Shadayim and bracha afterwards. But hakabetza boy Netilu ubracha. When it says that when you're medayik, that anything above a kabetza, that's regarding the Netilas Yadayim and making a birchas hamazon afterwards. But regarding sukkah, you wouldn't need it until you ate 2 or 3 eggs before you would have to use a sukkah. It's not a kasha. Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer gives you a specific number of meals that you must eat in the sukkah, 14 meals. People generally eat 2 meals a day. So you have to eat 14 meals, 7 days, 14 meals. There's no shir, you don't have to eat at all if you don't want, except we're going to learn a din that the first night of Sukkot you must eat in the sukkah. But all the other times, you don't have to. If you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat. You don't have to eat in the sukkah. If he wants to fast, he just drinks a little bit or he eats pachas, pachas make a shear. Doesn't have to eat in the sukkah. There's no specific din how many meals he has to eat. There's a din tashlumim that if a person didn't eat the first night in the sukkah, yashlim leila yontov achron shulchan, he can do tashlumim on Shmini Atzeres, even though you don't eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. So what kind of tashlumim is it? The Gemara will ask that. But Rabbi Eliezer says that you have tashlumim if you didn't eat the first day of Sukkot, the first night, you can do it the night of Shmini Atzeres. The Chachamim ain't dover tashlumim. The Chachamim say you're out of luck. If you didn't eat the first night, that's it. You can't correct it. V'al zeh nemar, there's a pasuk in Koheles. Me'uvat lo yichal litkon v'chesron lo yichal imanot. There are some things that have no takana. There's an example. You missed eating the first night in the sukkah. That's it. You lost the chance. Similar to like eating the first night of matzah, because that's the only time we have is midaraisa, the first night. So the Gemara goes, my time at Rabbi Eliezer. Why did Rabbi Eliezer give us specific? He's mechayev you to eat in the sukkah. It's not a matter of choice. says Teshvu, Pasukos Teshvu, Ke'ain Taduru. You're supposed to sit in the sukkah the way you sit a whole year in your house. Madira achas b'yom achas b'layla. Most people on a daily basis eat them in the morning and in the evening. Afsuka achas b'yom achas b'layla. So it falls under the rubric of Teshvu Ke'ain Taduru. The Rabbanon says, yeah, but Kadira. It's like you're in your house. Madira iboy achol iboy lo yachol. When you're living in your house, there's some days you don't want to eat. You don't eat every day. It's up to you. Afsukanami iboy achol eats. If he wants to eat, he eats. Iboy lo yachol, he doesn't eat. Well, if you're going to put it as a choice, afilu leila yom tov rishon nami. Ihachi afilu leila yom tov rishon nami. How come though? It seems to imply that Yom Tov Rishon, you don't have a choice. Hang on, let me just move this. I'm wishing happy birthday. Yom Tov Rishon, you don't have a choice. Yom Tov Rishon Nami, it should be optional. Or Rav Yochanan Shom Ben Yoyed Tzedek Nemar Khan is a very famous Gzeir Shabbat. Nemar Khan Chamisha Asur. It says B'Chamisha Asur Yom LaChodesh Hashvi Hazeh Chag HaSukkos. And then it says B'Nemar Chamisha Asur B'Chag HaMatzos. It says V'Chamisha Asur Yom LaChodesh Hazeh Chag HaMatzos L'Hashem. So we make a Hekesh of Gzeir Shabbat 2-2 Tesvav. Nemer kan chamisha asur b'chag hamatzos malal layla rishon chayva. On Pesach, there's a chiyuv to eat matzah the first night. Mikan ve'elech reshus. After the first night, it's optional whether you want to eat matzah or not. Afkan, by eating in the sukkah, layla rishon chayva. Mikan ve'elech reshus. There's a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah the first night, but not any afterwards. Where do you see that there's a chiyuv to eat matzah the first night of Pesach? Omer Kra, ba'erev toichlu matzahs. So there's a chiyuv to eat matzah. Hakasuv koach chayv. The Adam Rabbi Eliezer said there's tashlumim, that if you miss the first night, you have tashlumim shmini atzos. Omer Rabbi Eliezer arba esrei tzudas chayv adam lechol b'sukkah achas b'yom v'achas b'layla. So what about when you eat it Shmini Atzeres? You're not eating in the sukkah. There's no chiv sukkah Shmini Atzeres. So if you didn't eat the first night, you're deficient. You only ate 13 meals. Amar Bir Amar Vami Chazer Bar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer changed his mind. It's not in the sukkah. It's because of chiyuv yontif. You need 14 seudos, and therefore, if you missed the first night, you only have 13. The Sudas Yontif that you have, Shmini Atzeres at night, will fulfill it. So it's not related to the sukkah. Now the Gemara says, Mashlim b'mayim. How are you going to do the tashlum? What are you being mashlim? Ileva berifta, you're talking about bread. Suda the yom ha'koachel? I mean, you eat bread every day. How are you going to show that you're being mashlim as a sudas yontif? You eat special delicacies that usually are reserved for yontif, and that's what you add as a hashlama to the Shmini Atzeres meal, the night of Shmini Atzeres. We, of course, paskin like the Chachamim, that there is a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah the first night. After that, it's just a rishus. If he wants a seudah, then he eats it in the sukkah. And if he wants to eat or drink things only that are not Mechayev sukkah, you can eat them all outside the sukkah. Back to the Gemara. Shola Petrova Shalagripas Amelachas Rabbi Yezer. The executor who was in charge of the assets of Agrippas HaMelech, who lived in that time between Herod and the destruction. He lived between 0 and 70 CE. So he asked Rabbi Yezer, Kagon ani, she'eni rogel lechol ela sudachas bayom. I only eat one meal a day. Mao shoichel sudachas ve'eftor. If I eat one meal in the sukkah, is it good enough for me? Yeah, you may only eat one big meal, but the rest of the day you're eating all sorts of desserts and snacks. What about you're going to be hungry? Aren't you prepared to do that in the sukkah as well? He asked him, I have two wives, one in Tveria, one in Tzipori. V'yeshli shtei sukkos. And I have two sukkahs, achas b'Tveria, achas b'Tzipori. Ma'u sheitze mitzukkah l'sukkah v'pater. Can I go and eat a couple of days in this sukkah and a couple of days in the other sukkah? That means, do I have to designate one sukkah and I have to eat all 7 days in that sukkah? Omer lo shani omer. He says, lo. Rabbi Eliezer said, you may not. Shani omer kol hayotze mitzukkah l'sukkah bitel mitzvah shel rishon. If you leave your sukkah and eat in a different sukkah, you're mevatel the mitzvahs that you did before, and therefore you're chayav to sit in the same sukkah for 7 days. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer omer. Ein yotzim in sukkah l'sukkah. He says la halacha. You can't go. You have to eat in the same sukkah all 7 days. Not only that, if you didn't build your sukkah before sukkahs, and you have no sukkah, you can't start from scratch and build it in Chol HaMoed, because that sukkah would be a sukkah that's not built for 7 days, and therefore it would be a deficiency in it. Chachamim oimrim yotzim misukkah l'sukkah. You don't have to stay in the same sukkah. One day I could eat here, one day I could eat by Harold, one day I could eat by Johnny. I don't have to eat by my sukkah or in the same sukkah. And therefore, if I had not constructed a sukkah from before Yom Tov, I can do it on Chol HaMoed. Now, Shavin, they agree in both cases that if you built one and then Nafla, you could certainly rebuild it in Chol HaMoed. My type of Rabbi Eliezer that requires one sukkah for all 7 days. Omer Kra, Chagas Sukkos Tasem Chashivas Yomim. Asay Sukkah Rayul Shiva. You have to build a sukkah that's good for that you stand in for 7 days. The same sukkah. Rabbanon Hachi Kam Rabbanon. Asay Sukkah B'Chag. That means make a sukkah for the Chag, which is a 7-day Chag. The chiyuv to be in a sukkah is all 7 days, but not that it's got to be the same sukkah. The shavin shemnaflo shechayzer boino yosef b'chol shabbat. There was no machlokas that if they built the sukkah from before sukkahs and then it fell, you can rebuild it. So pshita, I mean, why would I think not? Maybe according to Rabbi Eliezer, it would be a different sukkah. Ve'eno l'shiva. And if this sukkah now is only going to be used for 5 days, it's not royal l'shiva, maybe I can't do it. Kamash Malon, that Rabbi Eliezer says I can do it. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Ramekshem Shein Adam Yotzei Chavos B'Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag Belulvo Shel Chaveh. I cannot be Yotzei the mitzvah of lulav on the first day of Sukkot with my friend's lulav. It's got to be yours. You can't use somebody else's. T'chsivu l'kachtem lachem b'yom harishon. Create sadar kapos mari mishalachem. Got to be yours. Kach ein adam yotzei dei chavos b'sukkah shel chavero. Rabbi Yezer learns the din of sukkah is the same as lulav. It's got to be mishalachem. T'chsiv chagas sukkos taselecha shivas yomim mishalcha. So there's a chisaron if you borrow a sukkah or it's not yours. Or I go to somebody else's sukkah. The Chachamim agree to that din that you must have a lulav that belongs to you. But you can't be yotze in somebody else's sukkah. All citizens in Israel must sit in a sukkah. Technically, we could all sit in the same sukkah. It doesn't have to be our own. It could be something that belonged to everybody. We paskin that way. You can be yotzei, two partners build a sukkah. You could go into your friend's sukkah and eat there, and your Makai mitzvah sukkah. What are the Rabbanon Halacha my Darshi day? What do they do with the lecha? Chagas sukkos taseh lecha. Lecha means it's got to be your own. You need it. I cannot use a stolen sukkah. So I need the lecha. Otherwise, I would think I could use a stolen sukkah. Aval she'ula ksiv kol ha'ezrach. But a borrowed sukkah is considered that would fulfill this thing that all Jews could live in the same sukkah. So Rabbi Yezer, hai kol ha'ezrach my ovidle. What is Rabbi Yezer, who says you're not allowed to eat in somebody else's sukkah? What does he do with kol ha'ezrach? Let's say a convert becomes a convert in the middle of sukkahs, or kodesh and gadol ben tayim. A child becomes a bar mitzvah in the middle of sukkahs. That you might think that since he wasn't there for the beginning, and therefore since he doesn't have a 7-day chiyuv, he has no chiyuv at all. No. Kol ha'ezrach teaches him that even if his chiyuv to do the mitzvah only started in the middle of sukkah, he has to do it. Rabbanon, how do they learn the din? Well, we already know that you can build a sukkah in the middle of Chol HaMoed, so I don't need a pasuk to tell me that a ger or a cotton shehigdil has a special dispensation to build a sukkah. We know it from being able to rebuild it in Chol HaMoed. Rabbi Eliezer Rabba Belud Beregel. Rabbi Eloi went to visit Rabbi Eliezer on Yontif. Amar lo Eloi, Eincha mishoyv se'aregel. You're coming to Lod, you got to be oile regel to Yerushalayim. Or Rashi says, you didn't stay home with your wife. I know there's a mitzvah to be magbil pnei rabbo on Yontif, but there's a mitzvah to be beregel with your wife. He praised those that were lazy, that did not go up and leave their families on Yontif. Because you shall be happy with your wife. Beischa usually means your wife. If he left, he would not be able to be Samecha's wife. What do you mean? There's a chiyuv that you have to go to see your Rebbe on Yontif. Shenamar, by the Navi Elisha and the Isha Shunamit. She hosted him when Elisha traveled, and the husband asked the Isha Shunamit, "Why are you going to visit the Navi? Madua atoy lecha selav hayom lo chodesh v'lo Shabbat." Why? Because she wanted to go and ask for a child. So the husband was wondering, why are you going to the Navi? It's not Shabbos, it's not Rosh Chodesh, which implies it seems like the custom was that on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh they visited their Rebbe. So there seems to be conflicting chiyuvim. Loi kasha hada ozol v'asa b'yoyme. If he visits in the day but comes back at night, then there's no problem. because he can keep his wife happy at night. But where he doesn't come back at night, that's a problem because his wife would be alone. Ton Rabban and Meiser Rabbi Eliezer Sheshavas Begoli LaElyon B'Sukkos Shel Yochanan Rabbi Loi. Okay, sorry. Rabbi Eliezer spent Shabbos in the Sukkah of Yochanan Rabbi Loi in Caesarea. Va'amri Lo B'Kesarion. Some say it was Kesarion. V'Yigia Chamalos, it became hot. Rav Yochanan ben Eloi wanted to spread. He was mitzta'er because of the heat, and he wanted to spread like a sheet over the sukkah. Or is there some kind of isser to do that? He diverted for some reason the answer, and he said there is no shevet that one of the shoftim didn't come out of them. Rashi, also Shayu Mishemes Yoshuvat Shmuel. The shoftim were those between when Yoshua died, when Shmuel. Yoshua came from Ephraim. Ehud ben Gira from Binyamin. Gidon Mimnashe. So those are the Bnei Rachel. Shimshon Midon. Barak Mikedesh Naftali. Arei Mibnei Bila. If Sanze Boaz is Mi Yehuda. Eli is Mi Levi. Tola Mi Yisachar. Elona Zvulani Mi Zvulun. Elu Mufurashim. Aval Atniel ben Knaz. V'Yiftach v'Shamgar. V'Yair v'Avdon lo yadati shmo shriftein. U'Meruven v'Shimon Gad v'Osher lo matzati mefurish. But Rashi is saying Mistama, those four Shvatim came from Reuven, Shimon, Gad, v'Osher because those are the only ones left. And the Gemara says every Shevet produced a Shofet. So that's an interesting Rashi for those of us who've been learning Nach. Higia chama lachatzi asukah. So it got hotter. You're going to ask, can I spread the sheet over the sukkah? Every shevet produced neviim. Shevet Yehuda Binyamin, hemidu malachim al pi neviim. And shevet Yehuda Binyamin, the neviim.
Ernie.
Ken. לא, עם מי אני מדבר? כן, אבל פגשתי עם רב זילברסטין אתמול בלילה ברמת גן. ישבתי איתו שעה. תודה כל כך So, הגיע חמה למרגלויסov של Rabbi Eliezer. The sun now came to the feet of Rabbi Eliezer. Noto Yochanan sadinu perish aleh. Yochanan spread the sheet. Hivshil Rabbi Eliezer talisu lach Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer left the sukkah. Lo mipnei shefligu b'dvarim. Not because he wanted to show that he didn't know the answer. Rabbi Eliezer had a minig never to say a dvar halacha that he hadn't heard from his Rebbe. Apparently, he didn't hear directly from his Rebbe. That's why he was changing the subject all the time. Now, how was it that he spent Yontif, Sheshavas? We said he was not in his regular city. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, and yotzim sukkah l'sukkah. Right? He said you have to stay in the same sukkah. How could he be going to a different sukkah? So regel acher havoy. This was a different yontif. It wasn't sukkahs. They were sitting in a sukkah because of the nice shade, but it wasn't really yontif sukkahs. Rabbi Eliezer was the one who praised the people who didn't leave their homes and stayed with their wives. So the Gemara says it wasn't yontif Shabbos havi. It was a din of Shabbos. And the shayla about putting the sadin up had nothing to do with the mitzvah of sukkah. It had to do with the Indian of binyan on Shabbos. Freik the Gemara, they could have answered it. V'tifshut lemi didei. It's not. Kaka chalon. Those were one of those windows that we learned in Masechta Shabbos, that removable windows. Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Bisman shekosher v'tolui. If they're still tied to the house, poikimbo, you can replace the window into the house. It's not considered binyan. Now, in lav, if it was not tied to the house, ain't poikimbo. You couldn't put the window back on Shabbos. You could do it either way. So l'chora, that's the answer about the sadin. Oh, says the Gemara, because by a window, you leave the window there. So you're mevatel it there. So it becomes part of the structure. But by the sheet, not mevatel it there, you're going to remove it. Eventually, on sukkahs, you're going to remove it. So the sheet is not part of the sukkah, and therefore it's not permitted. Well, sudden anan sadi lo mevatel legabi sukkah. So hilkach lo pshita Rabbi Eliezer Levi Moisif. Maybe he wasn't pushed whether you could add the sadin to the sukkah. Okay. So tomorrow is Wednesday.